Hello, welcome. I'm Arthur, and I lead the taxonomy team at Salesforce, which is in the marketing organization, and we're responsible for taxonomy maintenance, governance, and content auto-classification. A tradition we have at Salesforce is to give thanks at the beginning of meetings. So I would like to thank you all for having an interest in this subject. I want to thank our partners at Semaphore. They've been on this journey with us since 2020, so that's very much appreciated. Nice to see you in the room, too. And thanks to my team, who isn't here. They're in California, sleeping probably still. And thanks to them, because they've always kept their eye on the prize, and they also helped me with this deck. So you really want to thank them, because my version was not as pretty. Before we get going, I'd like to get an idea of who's in the room. So by a show of hands, how many of you work with taxonomies? Okay, so it sounds like everybody in here. And how many of you work with websites or digital experiences, online learning, for example? Okay, and how many of you work with large data and metadata sets? Okay. Great, so I am preaching to the choir here, which is great. I was gonna say how many of you haven't raised your hands yet, but I don't think that's anyone except maybe the camera operator. So, when we were creating our API a few years ago, the architects and the engineers that I was working with, they totally understood taxonomy. They got it from day one. And I said to the product manager, I said, how is this possible? How do they understand it? It's such a niche industry. And she just looks at me and says, Arthur, it's data. And really, it's metadata in our case, and it's applied and used a lot. So we're going to show how we use it in marketing and across the company at Salesforce. So I know you're probably here for different reasons today. You know, maybe you want to adopt Semaphore, maybe you want to stand up a taxonomy, maybe you need a scalable way to find and use your data. I learned to be a taxonomist on the job, and I'm actually a writer, editor by training, but I understood that taxonomies can solve a lot of problems. And for us at Salesforce, our biggest pain point was content discovery and delivery. We were just creating it at breakneck speeds. And how can we classify and accurately deliver thousands of documents from more than a dozen different sources? And how can we reuse that content in a variety of scenarios? So you probably have similar issues. I understand your pain. I'm going to do a little quick review on taxonomy basics, and then we're going to go to the meat of the presentation, and we'll have Q&A at the end. Okay, so people don't initially think an enterprise cloud computing company needs taxonomists. So I usually get the following responses when people ask what I do. So the taxidermy one is the most basic. And a lot of just, huh? And the other one is just, but how does that apply to tech? And really, taxonomy is just a way to classify stuff. In our case, our stuff is content, and lots of it. So I made the transition from print to digital, and that's when I first learned the benefits of taxonomy. When we were putting together newspapers and magazines, you had a table of contents, and everything belonged in one section of your publication, and there was no way to cross-reference or reuse that content. So then you enter digital experiences with taxonomy, and it's like the light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, this is how you cross-reference it. And you have to apply the taxonomy terms properly, otherwise you're not going to be able to reuse it. So when I came to Salesforce in 2014, they had already had an agency that was building a taxonomy. And so I inherited that, and because I had built taxonomies at Salesforce, well, yes, at Salesforce, but at Stanford and Berkeley before coming to Salesforce, they're like, okay, you know what you're doing. They kind of handed it to me. But what I really didn't expect to discover was that people from all over the company started knocking on our doors as, you know, we were marketing and we had multiple content platforms in marketing that we were trying to connect. But then customer success came to us, and sales and product. And they said, hey, we hear you have a taxonomy and a taxonomy tool. We're really interested. So it was a great way, because our initial goal was a connected content ecosystem. And all of a sudden, we are working our way toward building an enterprise taxonomy and ontology. We're not there yet. It's going to take a lot of work because when I started Salesforce, there were 17,000 employees. There are about 80,000 now. And it just is really hard to keep track of everything. So here's the power of taxonomy. It's really big picture. And what you see here on your left is a homepage, a sample section of the homepage. This is static. This is one solution for everybody who comes to the website. On the right, however, the content is customized. It's personalized, dynamic delivery, whatever you want to call it. It is done by taxonomy terms. So that headline that's below the 4 cards, and we call these elements cards. It is a Lightning Web Component built on Salesforce, and it's generated using taxonomy and metadata to create a card, and they can be anywhere in the experience. So this is the new normal for us. The one-size-fits-all just doesn't work anymore. And you can have very simple business rules that say, oh, this visitor is coming from an ISP of a higher education. Let's give them content that's geared around higher education with that taxonomy term. So that is at its simplest level. So in the talk's description, I said that personalization and dynamic delivery get a bad rap. And they do sometimes when you're at a party and you're saying something and then ads show up on your social feed. A little scary, but we're dealing B2B here. And people need to get information, and they need to get content, and they need to get it fast. And it really, it helps. But there is an agreement that people make if they want to give their personal information, which is what Salesforce loves to get. They want something in exchange. They want something that's relevant and relatable. So for the marketing website, we want people to fill out forms. That's our leads. They fill them out, and then we call them, and we kind of figure out what their business needs are. If you do this right and you serve relevant content, they're going to give you their information, and then you give them the content, and then it starts a conversation. And so what we found is that we had a resource center, and we keep all of our resources in one place, and we saw a 67% increase of visitors clicking on a button to learn more because it was personalized content that was related. And sometimes it was just topic. If they were on the artificial intelligence page, so obviously we're going to serve more artificial intelligence content, they clicked on the form. And of those 67%, we saw a 167% jump in visitors who got to the next screen. You have traditional fall off. People always, they'll click on the form, CTA, but then they'll never fill it out. And so to have that 167% increase was really helpful. And finally, there was a 300% jump in those who actually filled out the form. This is great. It's the same content, but now you're serving it to the right person, and they're actually engaging with you, and it's helping the sales pipe and the funnel. So how did we do it? Our initial taxonomy that the agency gave us in 2014, it was big. It was supposed to connect help, and it was going to serve everyone in the company. And the drawback was it was too blue sky. We just weren't ready to use all those terms. And what we ended up doing is we spent a lot of time deprecating them. So if I were to create a taxonomy again, it would be on a need-to-have basis, and then you start growing it from there. But this initial taxonomy became our core taxonomy that we link all other models to. So we created a governance council about 7 years ago to ensure we weren't adding terms ad nauseum. I was there at Salesforce when we had a wild acquisition spree, and I would have to meet with the taxonomists from, not the taxonomists, but marketing from each of the acquisitions and add taxonomy terms. And so finally, the governance council, they are the bad cops, no, we can't add that term because the council says we don't really need it. And it really helps. So understanding the need for customization, we said, okay, we're going to have to make different models for different groups. We can't have one taxonomy that's going to help everyone. Blog only needs 200 of our 1,100 terms, and then the learning platform only needs 80, Trailhead it's called, they only need 85 terms. So we started creating different models, but what we did do is we all agreed that we could have the same terms under product, topics, role, industry, and business size. Those are our key areas that we deliver content around, and everyone kind of agreed, even in sales. They're like, yeah, we can all come together on those terms. So that has really helped with multiple models because we just link in these C360 terms. And we were doing this all in spreadsheets and Quip documents and Airtable. And it was really hard, especially when you're linking terms from one taxonomy to another, to manage all this. So that's when we brought in Semaphore in 2020. And it really made everything efficient. And 2 years later, we created an internal taxonomy API. We decided it would be easier to create an API that all of our internal stakeholders could connect into instead of having individual integrations into Semaphore. That's also the same time that we began using the Semaphore's auto classification tool to classify our content. So we hired someone to do that who's dedicated to classifying NLP and to fielding questions about machine learning, because everyone for the last year has asked us, will AI classify your content? And that's the concluding slide of this presentation. What was really the backbone of the taxonomy models are that the GUIDs, the unique identifiers, are in everyone's platform. We said to everyone, you've got to put the GUIDs in your platform. So when we do queries, we do all our queries by GUID, because people can call it what they need to in their platform, but we do the queries by GUID. And so we're actually, this year, we're doing a lot of dynamic queries. That homepage example I showed you, that is how we are delivering content in those business roles. So in the past, I used to have people say, you need to add this taxonomy term because my boss said so. And it used to work until we got a governance council and we had a lot of governance documentation, and people realized that we were serious, and we were able to dangle some carrots and show them the benefits of taxonomy. So term creep was a problem that we were having. People were adding terms just because they thought they needed them, and they weren't even using them. Well, we're going to use this. And so we came up with the rule of 9. You need 9 pieces of content before we can add the term to the taxonomy, or even ask the governance council if that's okay. We had one stakeholder who didn't really want to align. She had her own industry subverticals, and she said, I have to go with those. We said, that's fine, we'll add those to your model. But the problem is we won't be able to use your content because you're using specific terms. And especially by industry, we really said, you're kind of limiting yourself. So that's the carrot I'm talking about, is sure, we can accommodate your niche use case, but you are going to suffer because your content's not going to be used in the overall experience. That gets a lot of people to really change their mindset about it, and we've had a lot of success there. We also didn't have subject matter experts until the taxonomy team was formed. And what happens there is you just have a vacuum. And if there's no expertise, people just go and they build what they need to build. And I totally get it, but I most often get relief from people. Oh, you've done this already? I don't have to do this? May I plug into your API? And it's word of mouth at Salesforce, which is kind of strange with 80,000 people, but that's how we kind of evangelize, and it helps. And then also inaccurate measurement. If you're not aligning on your taxonomy from system to system, how are you going to measure how that content is performing? And that's where the GUID comes in super handy, because we can start measuring by the GUID in multiple platforms. And at the end of the day, you're here to delight your user. I started in content strategy UX at Salesforce as a content strategist. And it was really, people would say, I want to build a web page because my boss said so. And I would say, why? What are you trying to achieve? And what do you want out of it? And so by really thinking about the user and what the user is supposed to get out of it, it's helpful. So as we were revamping the roles section of our taxonomy, we had a term digital marketing manager, rather niche and not used a lot. So we did some internal research. We have in our UX team, they brought in their agency, and what we found is people don't identify with niche terms. They'll look at their line of business, commerce, marketing, sales, and service. That's how they identify. So these people who were digital marketing managers, they were fine with just the tag of marketing. And then we still would need developer and architect because that's a very specific term. But we separated it. There's pre-coordination and post-coordination. So instead of having marketing architect, you would tag the content with marketing and architect. And so then any architect could self-select and see what they're doing in marketing or commerce or sales. It's much broader, and it's been a lot more successful. So spreadsheets can accommodate a taxonomy until they can't. We brought in an agency in 2018, and they looked at everything and they said, you need a taxonomy management tool. And so why? It's because we needed to store a diverse set of alternate labels. We needed the ability of relating terms to one another, not just in a hierarchical order. And we needed a variety of ways that we could link models from terms from one model to another. And getting buy-in, having an agency make a recommendation after you just spent a lot of money on the agency helps. That was how we were able to justify Semaphore and bringing them in. But also there were some other benefits to get buy-in. Partnership. Salesforce divides its data between customer data and corporate data. And so all the customer data goes into our instance of Salesforce, and it's all the information we keep about our customers. But then we're also an enterprise company, and we have corporate data. But we all talk to each other. And I talked to the data governance people for customers and for the company, and they said, oh, you already have a taxonomy for products. We would love to use that. So it's kind of this, it's a great symbiotic relationship. And flexibility. We needed to accommodate certain people. On our learning platform, there's a drop-down menu, and admin is one of the roles. We can't change that, even though we refer to it as administrator. So we gave them their own model, gave them a model-specific label of admin, and they're really happy and we're happy because it has the same GUID. And there's just a time savings involved. If someone's already come up with a taxonomy, there's that time savings. But what we unexpectedly found was our case support team came to us and said, can we use your taxonomy API? Because we have all our values hard-coded into our app. And every time a name changes or we need to add a name or delete a name, it takes 2 sprints, which is a month. So if we do an API call, we can do it instantly. And so we adjust their model, they make the API call, and that's done within minutes. So that was a really nice benefit too. And we don't just come up with all the terms on our own. We use ISO, SIC for about a third of our taxonomy. And that's another carrot too, because we'll say, well, we use this term because it's an industry standard. And we had lots of discussions about healthcare and life sciences. People wanted to call it healthcare. Then they wanted to call it health and life sciences. And we said, it's healthcare and life sciences. So then they started arguing about the ampersand. Is it an and or is it an ampersand? So it never ends, but we love that. And we were very fortunate because we had executive support from the CMO. She said, for this content delivery platform, we're going to have one taxonomy, and y'all are going to use it. So that was an added benefit to get buy-in. Now this is the Semaphore out-of-the-box taxonomy viewer. And every employee at Salesforce has access to this, and it is a way to see what the taxonomy is. We actually have an instructional video on it, and then what you can't see here is there's a hamburger menu on the upper right. You click on that, and it shows all the live models. So you can, if you're on the blog team and you want to see what your taxonomy terms are, you click to blog. And what I really like about this example is it's one of our products. If it weren't a product, it would have all the translations here too, but we do not translate our product names. So account engagement is an actual acquisition. It was called Pardot for years, which is a marketing software, but finally we brought them into the fold and renamed them account engagement. But the legacy label of Pardot is still there. So when we hook this up to our search engine and people search for Pardot, it's going to deliver content tagged with account engagement. And also, this B2B marketing automation is a topic. And this is an example of an associative relationship. So we can add topics, roles, industries to products. And this is really helpful in search and in content delivery scenarios. We're going to see that in a little bit. So we call the manual application of tags to, or taxonomy terms to content tagging. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have it done consistently to get your content to appear in the right place. But for us, taxonomies have a second purpose, and it is the aboutness of the content. So if the content is tagged with Sales Cloud, it's about Sales Cloud. We have a lot of people who come up to us and say, oh, we need this other metadata field, like external facing or internal facing or gated or ungated. And that's content metadata. That's not really taxonomy. And what we're moving toward is creating a different housekeeping model of taxonomy terms. We don't mind storing controlled vocabularies or anything, but we don't want it to be the taxonomy. And otherwise, people just start misunderstanding what a taxonomy is. And they just think, oh, we tag it, and then they hack the taxonomy to get the pages to appear where they want them. And that's a mess that you want to stay away from. So in my 20 years in the publishing industry, I've seen all different levels of tagging. I've seen excellent tagging. I've also seen not so excellent tagging. And that's understandable. The areas of product, role, industry topic, business size that I mentioned, that's 325 terms. And you can't expect a human tagger to objectively look at each piece of content and apply the terms. That's really hard, unless that's their full-time job. So this is where the rules-based natural language processing comes into play, which tagging can be often tedious. And what this does is it classifies content consistently. So we can give it a bunch of documents, and it's going to act the same with each one. Now, my Daryl, who classifies our content, he was on vacation, and so I was doing it for him. And I'm like, ooh, wow, is this really about this? And you would untag it. But we own the whole process. So we get the content, we classify it, we alert the content creator that, hey, this is what we came up with. Do you agree or disagree? And we do that in Slack. There's this great thing, webhook integration. And so as soon as you put the taxonomy terms on the Google Sheet, it alerts the person. So it's really helped prepare our content for reuse, but it also helps with SEO. It helps with filtering and just a better user experience, which is really what we're trying to do. And the added benefit is you can analyze by taxonomy term. You can see where there are gaps, and I'll show you some examples of that in a bit. This is a manual word cloud, and this is what we've done is we've manually tagged 2,600 blog articles. And there were a total of 85 topic terms from which they could choose. Now, they only used 38 of those. And digital transformation and leading through change rise to the top. They're used the most. And the reason is because that's how you got the content on the page in the blog. You had to tag it with leading through change or digital transformation. Problem is that leading through change was COVID era. We don't use that anymore. So your second most often used term is kind of useless. And before auto classification, to go back and retag content or to take that off, it's just too much work. And so this is when you auto classify those same 2,600 blog posts, we got a much better distribution of terms. Of the 85 terms, 74 of them were used at least once, and you can tell by the size. And what's great is customer experience, artificial intelligence, trust. Those are all our brand marketing themes. I mean, those are corporate themes. So the classifier is picking up on our themes better than our content creators. And it is, this should be very telling to anyone in our organization. And I was getting flack about, oh, you're doing a word cloud? That's so ancient. But I don't know a better way to demonstrate this. So here's where we get to see our taxonomy at work delivering content. This is an example of a homepage in the center that Chris would see based on his profile attributes. So Chris is a sales manager for a medical device manufacturer, and he's based in the Sacramento area. And one thing we love to do, like I said earlier, is collect information on our sales prospects and our customers. We're CRM. And so we know from his user profile that he's a sales leader. We also know he's in the medical device and diagnostics industry, and the manufacturer he works for is a small to mid-sized business. Because he's new to Salesforce, he doesn't know how to use it that much, and that's why his skill level is beginner. And we actually have a point total. If you're under 25,000 points, you're a beginner. So the recommendations at the top, the customer stories, those are based on taxonomy terms, medical device and diagnostic, and also, is it healthcare and life science? Yeah. So that's what we know, he's in those industries. Now the middle module is, these are generated based on his profile attributes, and you can see that it's mostly, sales leader and the size of the company and everything, but there's sales and leadership at the bottom. And those aren't terms in his profile. And this is where associative relationships come to play, because we know if you're a sales leader, you're going to be interested in content that has a topic of sales and leadership. And that's the associative relationship feature that we use all the time. And at the bottom, those are learning modules. So if the content isn't classified properly, he's going to get served content that's not relevant to him, which is a fail. And worse, if it's barely tagged, it limits reuse options of that content. You spend a lot of money creating content, you want to be able to use it. Here's our architecture diagram. So we've decided to keep content in its walled gardens, and those are CMSs in the center, and they all have GUIDs in them. So they connect to the API, they get the GUIDs, they put the GUIDs in their system, but we have a content metadata index, and it generates those cards, which are, a page is an assemblage of cards. And what the index stores key metadata, title, description, and anything else, accessibility, images, all of that stuff. It's just an index. It ingests content, and when someone clicks on that card in the experience, it'll take you to the platform that's listed there in the center. And so that's how we kept content in its own silos, but made it accessible, and everyone can borrow from the content index. So blog can pull in video content, and events can pull in webinars. And it's updated in real time. So as we add content to it, it's there. So as we get more elaborate in our content delivery, we will be able to really tailor content. This page, this is an interesting example. It's a Sales Cloud product called Partner Relationship Management. And on the left, it was the tagger missed mid-market. The manual tagger got it, but the auto classifier didn't. And there are certain terms that you will not be able to auto-classify. And that's where having a human in the loop is so important. You probably could write a zillion rules and finally figure out that's about a mid-market company, but that's really hard. So know that you will have to manually tag some terms. In the center is everything that both the manual tagger, the human, and the auto-classifier got. And on the right-hand side, it's what the human missed. And when you look at those 5 terms, those are 5 losses that you cannot reuse that content, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I think I've demonstrated the importance of consistent tagging. It's the backbone of getting good content to people. So let's be honest, a taxonomy is never done. It's a living document, but we can make a lot of progress with a well-governed taxonomy. And oftentimes with just the click of the button, we'll reclassify all of blog. If we add 17 new taxonomy terms to the blog taxonomy model, we can reclassify all the existing content and add those terms. So it's just to hire people to do that manually is too time consuming, and this is more efficient. So a few quick examples. I had colleagues who would just tag their content with every single product because it gives it good exposure and it doesn't help the user. And remember, we're here to help the user. And the user has managed expectations when they click on Data Cloud. They want customer stories that are Data Cloud customer stories. And we, in our search experience, these are all taxonomy terms on the left. And we want this to be consistent from community, from blog, from webinars, everywhere. We want to have the same experience with the same GUIDs, which are, well, taxonomy terms. So that's our vision. And then we can see how content is tagged with specific taxonomy terms, how they're performing. So you can see right there, there's the agriculture and mining. And we also can do gap analyses and say, hey, you've got this term, but it has no content to it. Or you have a lot of content on this term. Is that 5 minutes till Q&A? Okay, great. And we're almost finished. One more slide, so that's great timing. So there's a lot. It's not just content delivery, but it's content analytics by taxonomy term. And how we do it is if you are on our homepage and we know who you are and you click on a story tagged with manufacturing, cloud, and enterprise, those are then added to your profile. And it's like, oh, that person is interested in manufacturing content and at the enterprise level. So that's how we progressively and incrementally add data on our customers, and then we're able to deliver content around that. So we don't want to waste your time. And last subject is, where does AI fit into all of this? There was so much hype last year when ChatGPT came out. Large language models definitely can benefit from a taxonomy being loaded into them. It understands hierarchical relationships and what's an add-on product to a parent product. It's very helpful, so there's benefit in doing that. I also tried to get ChatGPT to come up with a taxonomy after reading a document, and I think you need a very big corpus in order to come up with what it should, what taxonomy terms it could suggest, and it actually gives me like descriptions. It's more thematic. And then keep an eye out for vector databases. They are, I think that's where things are going with classification. I think once we vectorize everything, we will be able to put like things together, but this is where taxonomy is going to be important because that's going to give you the attributes to that content. Because sure, you can lump like things together, but how do you measure it? How do you identify it? And I think taxonomy terms are not going away with AI. So it's just a matter of when this is all going to happen. And with machine learning classification, we're finding certainty rates of 0.76 out of 1. And when we auto-classify using NLP, we're getting 0.95, about mid-90s. So I don't think rules-based is going to go away either, classification. I think it's going to be the QA loop in the future. So that wraps it up for my presentation. I would love to answer any questions you may have, and I'm supposed to repeat them since there's no mic here. So if anyone has a question. Yes?
You mentioned about two-thirds of the way through that you found some benefit from having certain terms couldn't be auto-classified.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're talking about. I've seen the same thing myself. And then you had having somebody look behind helps you kind of catch those sort of. But what criteria do you use to identify content that would benefit from that manual review? Because there's so much of it. So how do you know what you're most likely to miss?
Well, we actually, so the question was, how do we know what we're likely to miss from our large bodies of content?
Benefit from manual review.
Right, that would benefit from manual review. Content type it falls really under concept classes. We're very fortunate that it can find the topics and everything. So in the areas where we would benefit is like, oh, we know what the content type is, we know what the business size is, we now can serve it in those areas that it wouldn't be served at all before. And so it's content consumption, I think, is the benefit by tagging in those hard to tag areas.
Well, sure. I
Yeah.
I get the benefit of
Yeah.
doing it. It's like they sort of preemptively either know or just from experience from seeing what the auto-classifier gives back to you. It's not handling this well. We know we're going to need someone to look at documents that we believe align with this particular
Yeah,
area.
and that's when we have to go back to the golden set of what we wrote the rules with. And if it's an area that we think we can fix and we can address the rules, then we will, that should address certain gaps. But it is, we also sometimes need to add new content types. So as groups are coming up with new formats and whatnot, we need to add that to the golden set. And that helps in those hard to identify areas. Yeah, no problem. Yes?
Could you talk a bit at the highest level about change management necessary to, number one, sustain something like this
Mhm.
period of years and continually obtain funding and support, but implement it, and it's a program, right?
Yes.
That lives on in perpetuity, and so I guess my question is what guidance would you have for those of us here who think about implementing something like this, but given organizational complexities?
Yeah, so the question is change management, and how would you get a program like this? How would you not only launch it, but sustain it? And I think a lot of that is evangelism. We did a lot of road shows where we went to different groups, and we went with architects, like the senior architect for marketing and the product owner and myself, and we had a lot of conversations of what the benefits were. And then for sustaining that, it's as soon as you start doing it, it's showing the blog example of, hey, this is what taxonomy and classification does. So we have a Slack thread. Our classifier, he has a newsletter, the classification curmudgeon, because he's a curmudgeon, and we kind of tell our victories. So it's constant managing up. And it's showing the successes, even the small ones. We recently wanted to get rid of all of our COVID-19 content. And so we found anything tagged with COVID-19, and they were just going to deprecate it. But that content had other tags on it that was still relevant. And so we ran a report, and we ran them through the classifier, and we said, oh no, even though these are COVID-19 related, they're still really relevant. So we broadcast that information as well. So it's a constant upward communication, and you have to keep people excited about it too. And for the case of the blog, when we demonstrated auto classification, you mean we don't have to do this anymore? And they were relieved because they could hit the high importance tags, manually do those, and then the classifier would do the rest. But it's also having it across the corporation, having a governance council, keeping, we don't deliberate over terms as much in the council. We kind of bring in what all our new partners are doing. And what we're finding in what we're getting the most requests for lately are skills. skills and competencies. And people want us to house skills and competencies, and there are about 4 or 5 of those taxonomies that we're aware of. And that's the buzzword. So not only are we sustaining the success of what governance does, but we're also showing the newcomers and how they're using it. And everyone in the council finds that really interesting. Any other questions? Yes.
We didn't see the knowledge, the KAM, and I'm just curious about how your model was built, how many schemes there are.
Yeah, so we have, the question was, we didn't see any schema of how things are built and how the models are structured, but we have in the 360 taxonomy, we have about 10 or 11 major concept classes. And within those, people structure them differently for their models, but they're all brought in from if there is a core term from our C360, our central taxonomy, they bring those in. And we basically had to re-architect everything in Semaphore, so we just have a products flat list. And that way it doesn't inherit any hierarchies, and so you just drag and drop individual terms into models. So it really is, every model is different, but we have about 24 L1s that like skills, products, industry, and we really need to change those. We know we need to change it to organization and to people. That is something that as we grow, we need to follow best practices. And so in one of the demonstrations, it might have even been yours, there was
We have those basic top levels.
yeah, and we need to do those. But right now it's serving the enterprise fairly well because people identify with product in industries we serve. But as we're going to build an ontology, that's when we have to level up like that. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there a particular methodology for introducing or loading taxonomies into the large language model which you found works particularly well?
The question is there any best practices around loading taxonomy models into LLMs? I have not found that out yet. I have tried to, one of our partners is Writer AI, and I said, can we put our taxonomy into Writer AI? And they said, oh, it's too much technical lift. And so we're at the nascent stages of this, but I really want to do that. And as Salesforce begins building its own LLMs, I think that's when we're probably going to find our first success. But it's really tough because it's not public. So ChatGPT doesn't know what our taxonomy is.
Right. Yeah, having a native LLM built for purpose would be a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah.
My company does not have the resources to do
It's yeah, that's something also. Do you want to be building LLMs all day? And I can tell you that the LLM Salesforce is building, it's not going to be around marketing content. It's going to be, I'll be at the end of the line. So it is, yeah, a lot of times if it's around certain initiatives at the company, you can get in that way, but you really have to do it yourself or find someone who can help you do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Yeah.
So you talked about like how content is expensive to produce, right?
Mhm.
So by introducing this methodology, do you have any metrics on how it improves the authors' lives? And are they getting pumping out extra articles every week because they're not doing it?
So the question is what productivity gains have we seen through classifying content? And we've just begun this year doing that. And it actually is a lot of work for my team to add the taxonomy terms, but I think it's going to help in sales and in SEO and in leads. So that's really, I don't think it's going to help the content creators as much because it's 5 minutes to tag the content, but I really think it's going, once you see that, oh, this is well-tagged content, it's the SEO's rankings are going up or this content's being engaged with. So I think our success metric will be engagement. Are people engaging with this content? We also put a time limit on our content. So after X amount of years for blog, it's usually 2 years. That's when they consider, if it's not a high-performing page, it's deprecating that. Anyone else? Great. Well, I will let everyone continue their lives now that this conference is over. But thank you so much. Really good questions, and I appreciate your time. Thanks. And if you have any other questions, just come up.